Michael Schnell says, I have trouble making decisions and it really hinders my building process. Do you ever have that trouble? How do you overcome it? Yes, I do. And I do have something to say about this as a operating stratagem. When I'm having trouble making a decision, pulling the trigger on something, a yay or nay, this way or that way, it's usually because I don't know enough. If the stasis persists and I remain unable to make the decision, it's often the case that I don't know enough, but I'm also unfamiliar with how much I need to know to make this decision. And I'll give you an example that may contextualize that. I think all of us, every one of us has been in the position at a time of wanting to know all the things to make the right answer. We want to know all the things. When is it going to happen? How much is it going to cost? How much is it going to inconvenience me? How much is it going to inconvenience you? Let me know all those things and then I can make the call. And the answer is, you're never going to know all the things. The set of knowledge you will have to make a decision is always an imperfect set of knowledge. So there's always an aspect to making a decision that is a gut call. And so that becomes how much information is enough to go on. And that's when I start to ask myself things like, well, so when I'm, yeah, that's an important one. How much is enough to go on? I'll go even further. I think it's not about knowing all the things you need to know to proceed. It's knowing just enough to know what the very next step is. So when I am in a place where I cannot make a decision, or I keep finding that I don't feel like I have enough information to make the decision, I look at the problem from two vantage points. One is, am I trying to learn too much to make this decision? And I'm trying to gather an unrealistic amount of information, and I'm going to have to just cherry pick a few things to go by. Or am I trying to take a step that's too big and I need to scale back and make a shorter step with the things that I currently know? Because from the vantage point of being my age now, after all the years I've been doing the things that I've been doing, I'm learning that the thing to pay attention to is every time I know a single thing. Like, knowing one thing about how to proceed is huge. Finding that one thing. So for me, it's a process. This is a metaphor here, but it's like I'm scratching through the dark and I'm like, okay, I can feel a cool breeze coming from this direction. I know nothing else about this environment. I'm going to move towards the cool breeze. That's a decision based on one parameter. And that's very much engineering-wise, creatively, what happens here in the cave. If I don't know the things to how to proceed, I'll look to, do I just know a thing that's enough for me to move a little bit forward? And then once you move just even a little bit forward, look up and around, and the landscape might have changed. You might understand different things from this point than you did from that point. I hope that is helpful. The doctor, 4269, says, I have a question about shop habits. This person works in aviation maintenance, which means that when they're at work, their workspace is very, very clearly laid out. Tons of tool tracking, specifically so you don't leave tools in some portion of the plane, like a doctor leaving forceps in a patient. But they say, in my home shop, however, the bench is often messy, and the mess is coupled with ADHD object permanence issues, and it can mean I have to spend 5 minutes looking for a tool I just had. I feel you, brother. Or sister. Do you work differently when you're in someone else's shop versus your own? Are there bad habits in your home shop you're focused on not doing in a shop that isn't your own? Yeah, I'm totally much neater in other people's shops. Last year, I think I talked about this on one of the live streams, but January of 2023, I spent the better part of a month in New York City working with some NYU students on a project that is still in flux and moving around in my head. But I was in New York working mostly evenings, And I had days free for 3 solid weeks. And so I called up Tom Sachs and I said, could I come in and just embed in your shop? And he was so welcoming and delighted to have me. And I went into his shop and served his studio, served his aesthetic. And that was spiritually really important. It was really neat. And yeah, I'm much neater in other people's shops than I am in my own. As I'm executing a specific problem, I will end up with mounds of tools, but I definitely really cleaned up. That's the aesthetic in his shop. Clean up after yourself, leave your stuff knolled at the end of the day. But just to want to talk about one extra step of that, because I do have the same issues here. The object permanence, ADHD issues, I have the same thing going on. I put down a tool, can't find it. It's why I have 150 of these in this building. It's why I won't go buy a really nice mechanical pencil, because I will just lose it. They have to be numerous. But there was a spiritual aspect to serving Tom Sachs's studio aesthetic that I found really rewarding, specifically because I've spent so much of my professional career building control over my aesthetic. That's the dream, right? Like, you get to execute what you want to execute. You don't have to polish a turd for someone else's crappy movie. And we all begin this way. We all begin polishing a turd for someone else's crappy movie, that's how you get experience. And there definitely, was a moment in which, I'm no longer doing that kind of work for hire. And that's great. Like, I wanted that. I want to be in control of my aesthetic. I want to be executing what I want. And I was really surprised by how spiritually rewarding it was to execute Tom's aesthetic, because it's a rigorous one. And being rigorous, it's not easy to hit. I know Tom really well. I felt like I knew his aesthetic really well, but once I was trying to actually service it and make stuff that looked like they were studio built, I got a much deeper understanding of just how rigorous and how deep that aesthetic goes. And that was fantastic for me creatively. It was like, I'm no longer trying to solve my aesthetic problems. I'm trying to solve someone else's. This is both easier and harder in different ways. It's a really fascinating exercise. It sounds in your question that there's a tension between the work version of yourself and the home version of yourself. And I feel that tension too. I try and clean this shop up every day. I fail a lot at that. I'll leave sometimes frustrated with a problem, knowing I'm going to clean up tomorrow morning because present me just can't handle this anymore. And that tension between between our person at work and our person at our aesthetic bench, that tension it's there. It's always going to be there. It's always going to be there. But I think there's interesting things to think about that. Like, I clean up after myself because I'm in somebody else's space. I want them to think well of me. I want to be easy to work with. I don't want to leave a trail of destruction. Said trail of destruction I left professionally for long periods of time before I matured as a maker. I think some of my old ILM colleagues would tell you that I didn't have the best reputation for leaving a clean workspace back then. No, they would totally say that.
Thank you for watching that video. Are you as sick of the tosses to membership as I am? Good, because here's a brand new one that I recorded today, and it's nice and short. There are 3 tiers to Tested membership, and they all offer awesome stuff. Find out about it by clicking the join link below. We'll see you there.